Our final story takes us to the crystal clear waters off Queensland, Australia, a place where adventure and beauty often meet. It was September 4th, 2006, at Bat Reef near Port Douglas. The turquoise expanse of the Great Barrier Reef shimmered beneath a perfect blue sky. For Steve Irwin, the beloved crocodile hunter, it was supposed to be just another day of filming. At 44, Irwin had built a worldwide reputation as a fearless wildlife conservationist. With his khaki shorts, infectious grin, and endless enthusiasm, he turned animal documentaries into thrilling, family-friendly television, inspiring millions to respect and protect nature. That morning, Steve and his crew were working on a project called Ocean's Deadliest. Unlike his usual heart-pounding encounters with crocodiles or venomous snakes, this shoot was meant to be relatively calm, showcasing the reef's colorful marine life. But when rough weather diverted their plans, the team headed to Bat Reef, an area teeming with rays, fish, and coral. There, Steve spotted a massive stingray gliding across the sandy bottom and decided to get a close-up for the cameras. Stingrays are typically shy and rarely attack humans, so the moment seemed like a safe way to capture more footage. With cameraman Justin Lyons filming, Steve floated just above the 7-foot ray. At first, everything appeared peaceful. Then, in an instant, that calm dissolved into chaos. The stingray whipped its muscular tail upward, driving its sharp barb into Steve's chest again and again. A rapid, defensive reflex triggered when the animal felt cornered. One strike pierced directly into his heart. Lyons later described the attack as a blur of motion. Like hundreds of strikes in seconds, Steve, who had faced down some of the planet's fiercest predators, was gravely wounded by a creature few would consider dangerous. The crew pulled him from the water and rushed him back toward their boat, desperately performing CPR. But the damage was catastrophic. Steve's final words, as remembered by Lyons, were heartbreakingly simple. "I'm dying." Within minutes, the man who had made the world fall in love with crocodiles, snakes, and sharks was gone. News of his death spread across the globe within hours, leaving fans stunned. For many, it felt unthinkable. Steve Irwin, who had handled man-eating reptiles and wrestled massive crocodiles, felled by a normally docile stingray? Tributes poured in from every corner of the world. Politicians, celebrities, and millions of ordinary people mourned the loss of a man who blended daring adventure with a deep love for animals. A memorial service at the Australia Zoo, attended by thousands and broadcast to millions, celebrated Steve as more than an entertainer. He was remembered as an educator, a conservationist, and a champion of wildlife whose enthusiasm inspired a generation to care about the natural world. In the years since, his family has carried that torch. Terry, Bindi, and Robert Irwin have expanded the zoo into a major hub for conservation, continuing the mission Steve started. Through documentaries, wildlife rescues, and education programs, they ensure his voice and vision live on. For Steve Irwin, the Great Barrier Reef was meant to be another backdrop for storytelling, a chance to share the magic of the ocean with his audience. Instead, it became the setting for one of television's most heartbreaking losses, a stark reminder that even the most experienced adventurers are not immune to nature's unpredictability. Steve's legacy, however, remains unsinkable, a bold, joyful call to protect the wild places and creatures that make our world extraordinary. The sun had just risen over the Mentawai Islands, painting the water gold. It was October 18th, 2024, and Italian surfer Giulia Manfrini was doing what she loved most, waiting for the perfect wave at the Bang Bang surf break off Massacut Island. The ocean was calm, surfers drifted on their boards, and nothing about that morning seemed dangerous. But in shallow water, danger often hides where no one expects it. Out of nowhere, the sea broke its silence. A needlefish, long, thin, and razor-billed, launched from the surface like a spear. These creatures are known to dart at terrifying speeds, but no one could have predicted what came next. The fish struck Giulia directly in the chest, its sharp bill driving deep into her upper left side. Witnesses froze in shock. The impact was so sudden, so violent, that she let out a scream before collapsing on her board. Panic erupted. Surfers paddled furiously toward her as waves rolled in. A friend tried to hold her, but the ocean seemed to conspire against them. A massive set crashed down, scattering rescuers and dragging her limp body beneath the surface. For a moment, she resurfaced, dazed, eyes searching for help. Then, as another swell approached, she fainted. By the time they pulled her to the beach, her breathing was shallow, her skin pale, foam clinging near her nose. Resort staff and fellow surfers worked desperately, performing first aid, shielding shielding her from waves, trying everything to bring her back. They rushed her to a nearby health center, fighting the clock, fighting the impossible. But the wound was too deep, the damage too severe. Julia was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The surfing world reeled. Needlefish accidents are rare, almost unheard of. Yet, here was a young woman, 36 years old, a former professional snowboarder turned surfer, a co-founder of A-Wave Travel, gone in a heartbeat. Her partner and friends remembered her smile, her energy, her way of lighting up every room, every trip. She died doing what she loved, in a place that she loved. Her business partner, James Colston, said, though the words carried more heartbreak than comfort. For locals, the tragedy was a grim reminder that the ocean, for all its beauty, can be merciless. Needlefish don't hunt humans. They don't stalk or plot. But when they leap from the water at high speed, their bills can pierce flesh and bone like a blade. Survivors of such attacks often carry scars, if they survive at all. Julia was not given that chance. Her death sent shockwaves across both surfing and travel communities. She wasn't just a surfer chasing waves. She was a traveler, a coach, an adventurer whose love for the ocean had carried her across the globe. Friends said she couldn't travel anywhere without people falling in love with her laugh, her spirit, her endless energy. And then, in the blink of an eye, a single strike ended everything. Not a shark, not a storm, but a fish. Something so small compared to the vast sea, yet powerful enough to pierce her heart. That is the cruel irony of shallow water tragedies. The danger doesn't always look like danger. Sometimes it looks like nothing at all. The ocean can give moments of pure joy, but it can also turn terrifying in the blink of an eye. For surfer Todd Gendel, the waters off Granite's Beach on South Australia's west coast became the setting for his final and most tragic ride. On a Tuesday morning in November, 55-year-old Todd paddled into the waves at Streaky Bay, one of the Eyre Peninsula's most famous surfing spots. A seasoned surfer who had traveled around Australia chasing the best swells, he was no stranger to the risks of the sea. But as he pushed further into the water, a deadly presence was waiting beneath the surface. Witnesses later described the shocking moment the attack happened. A large shark suddenly struck, knocking Todd from his surfboard. In front of horrified onlookers, the predator circled back and pulled him under. Panic and disbelief swept over the other surfers in the water. The ocean, which had moments earlier been a place of excitement, instantly became a scene of chaos and fear. Authorities quickly confirmed the worst. Todd had been killed in a shark attack. His devastated family later released a statement, thanking the police, volunteers, and community members who worked so hard during the search for his remains. They spoke of their grief, but also of the kindness and support shown to them by those who knew Todd and by the town of Streaky Bay. Police and emergency crews launched a major search in the days that followed. Boats, jet skis, and vehicles lined the rugged coastline as teams scoured the area. Conditions were difficult, with strong winds, heavy swells, and unpredictable currents slowing the operation. In the end, only Todd's surfboard and a few personal items were recovered. His body was never found, a haunting reminder of how vast and unforgiving the ocean can be. Superintendent Paul Barr described Todd as a highly skilled surfer who had spent much of his life traveling around Australia's coastlines in search of waves. While not a local, he was well known in the surfing community. Police made it clear there would be no attempt to hunt down the shark, saying it would be pointless to target a wild predator in its own territory. Several people witnessed the terrifying attack. Jack Martin was standing on nearby cliffs and saw the moment Todd was knocked from his board before the shark returned to deliver the fatal bite. Another local, surfer Jeff Schmucker, raced to the scene on his jet ski hoping to find Todd alive. He managed to collect Todd's board, but instead came face to face with a massive, great white shark, as long as a car. Whether it was the same shark that attacked Todd, he couldn't be certain, but the sight confirmed the grim reality of what had just unfolded. The tragedy was not an isolated event. Just months earlier, in May, local teacher Simon Baccanello was also presumed dead after being attacked by a shark at Walker's Rock Beach, about 120 kilometers away. And in October, a woman suffered serious injuries when a shark bit her leg while she was swimming off Beachport in the state's southeast. South Australian waters, rich in marine life and renowned for their surf, had seen a disturbing string of shark incidents in a short period of time. Granite's Beach, where Todd was attacked, is well loved by surfers for its powerful waves and rugged beauty, but its isolation also makes it dangerous. There are no lifeguards, no quick rescue teams, just open water and the unknown. For surfers, that's part of the appeal, but also the risk. Paddling out here means sharing the sea with one of nature's most fearsome predators. For the people of Streaky Bay, the loss of Todd struck deeply. Even though he wasn't from the town, his death left the community shaken. Locals who had rushed to help, who had witnessed the attack, and who shared the water with him that morning, will carry those memories for the rest of their lives. Sharks are an unavoidable part of Australia's coastline, and great whites in particular are protected by law. For scientists, surfers, and local communities, the debate continues about how to balance conservation with safety. But for families like Todd's, these questions come with unimaginable pain. As the waves continue to crash at Granite's Beach, surfers still paddle out, drawn by the thrill and beauty of the ocean. Yet the memory of Todd Gendle's final moments will always hang over these waters. A sobering reminder that the sea, for all its wonder, is also home to dangers that no human can control. Today's story takes us back to San Francisco, California on a chilly afternoon, January 26, 2001. In the quiet, upscale neighborhood of Pacific Heights, everything seemed calm. But inside the hallways of a luxury apartment building, one of the most shocking tragedies in modern San Francisco history was about to unfold. The victim was Diane Whipple, a 33-year-old lacrosse star and coach. Diane was born in Princeton, New Jersey, and raised by her grandparents in New York. From an early age, she was a gifted athlete. She represented the U.S. twice at the Women's Lacrosse World Cup, and even came close to qualifying for the 1996 Olympics. By 2001, Diane was the head coach of the women's lacrosse team at St. Mary's College in Moraga. She lived with her longtime partner, Sharon Smith, and was loved by colleagues, students, and friends alike. That afternoon, Diane returned home from the grocery store, carrying her bags through the hallway toward her apartment. At the same time, her neighbors, attorneys Robert Knoll and Marjorie Knoller, were handling their two massive Presa Canario dogs, Bane and Hera. These weren't your average pets. They were enormous. Bane weighed around 140 pounds and Hera nearly 100. They'd been bred for fighting and had ties to Paul Cornfed Schneider, a violent Aryan Brotherhood gang member serving life in prison, whom Knoll and Knoller had strangely befriended and adopted. For months, residents in the building had complained that the dogs were dangerous. Some neighbors reported being bitten or threatened. A dog walker had even warned Knoller to use muzzles, but nothing changed. As Diane walked past, Bane suddenly lunged. What followed was terrifying. Witnesses later said they heard Diane's screams echo through the hallway as the huge dog attacked. The assault was brutal. She suffered 77 bite wounds to her arms, legs, and torso, with only her scalp and the soles of her feet untouched. Her throat was torn open. Neighbors tried desperately to pull the animal off, and emergency crews rushed Diane to the hospital, but it was too late. She died from massive blood loss. That same day, Bane was euthanized. Hera was seized and later put down as well. Public outrage exploded. These weren't stray animals. They were known threats, and their owners had been warned again and again. By March 2001, both Knoll and Knoller were charged. Knoller faced second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter, while Knoll was charged with involuntary manslaughter. Both were also convicted of keeping a dangerous animal. The case was so high-profile, it had to be moved to Los Angeles. Knoller tried to claim she'd attempted to stop the attack, even suggesting that Diane's perfume might have triggered the dogs, a comment that only fueled public anger. In 2002, she was convicted of second-degree murder under implied malice, meaning she knew the risk her dogs posed but ignored it. After years of appeals, her conviction was upheld, and in 2008 she was sentenced to 15 years to life. Knoll served a 4-year sentence, was paroled in 2003, and died in 2018. Sharon Smith later filed a civil suit and won $1.5 million, donating part of it to St. Mary's lacrosse program. The case set a legal precedent, proving pet owners can face serious criminal charges if they knowingly put others in danger. For Diane Whipple, a life filled with achievement and mentorship ended just steps from her own front door, a horrifying and completely preventable tragedy. On September 4th, 2006, the world lost one of its most vibrant and fearless wildlife warriors in the most shocking way imaginable. Steve Irwin, known across the globe as the Crocodile Hunter, wasn't deep in the jungle wrestling a crocodile or face-to-face with a venomous snake. He was in chest-deep water on the Great Barrier Reef, filming what should have been routine footage. It was meant to be filler shots for his daughter Bindi's show, something simple and safe. But that day, fate had other plans. As Steve swam near Bat Reef, he approached a stingray, a creature usually considered shy and non-aggressive. The ray was massive, with a wingspan of nearly 2 meters. For a moment, it glided peacefully through the shallow water, and Steve, as he had done countless times before, positioned himself behind it for the camera. But in a sudden twist, the calm scene turned deadly. Mistaking Steve's shadow for a predator, perhaps a tiger shark, the stingray struck without warning. Its tail lashed, the venomous barb plunging directly into Steve's chest. At first, Steve thought he had only suffered a punctured lung, but the truth was far worse. The barb had pierced his heart. In the water, surrounded by his crew, the man who had wrestled crocodiles and charmed millions with his infectious cry of "Crikey" was bleeding to death. Cameraman Justin Lyons and others frantically pulled him onto the boat, performing CPR as they sped toward Low Island in desperate hope. But by the time they reached medical staff, Steve was gone. At just 44 years old, the crocodile hunter had died in front of his team, in front of the cameras, in front of the very nature he loved so deeply. The footage of the incident has never been released. Some claim it was destroyed out of respect. Others say it remains locked away, too harrowing to ever be shown. All we know is that Steve's final moments exist on tape, an unbearably painful reminder of how quickly life can turn. News of his death shook the world. In Australia, flags flew at half-mast. Leaders, celebrities, and ordinary people alike poured out tributes, unable to comprehend that a man so full of life could be gone so suddenly. Fans gathered at Australia Zoo, leaving flowers, notes, and stuffed animals at the gates. Across the globe, millions mourned a man who had brought wildlife into their living rooms and made it thrilling, even joyful. His funeral was private, just as his family wished, but a public memorial at Australia Zoo was broadcast worldwide. Russell Crowe opened the ceremony, joined by messages from Hugh Jackman, Cameron Diaz, Justin Timberlake, Kevin Costner, and countless others who had admired him. More than 300 million people watched as his daughter Bindi gave a heartbreaking tribute, and his favorite song, True Blue, was sung one last time. In a final symbolic gesture, Steve's old truck was driven out of the Crocuseum as staff spelled his iconic catchphrase, "Crikey," in yellow flowers. In the days after, a disturbing trend emerged. Dead stingrays began washing up on Queensland beaches, their tails cut off, believed by some to be acts of revenge for Steve's death. But his friends and family were quick to speak out. This was the last thing Steve would have wanted. His daughter, Bindi herself, said she still loved stingrays and bore them no hatred. To her, and to all who truly knew him, Steve's legacy wasn't about vengeance. It was about love, conservation, and a passion for the natural world. A quiet Sunday morning at Darling Downs Zoo in Queensland turned into a terrifying incident when a 50-year-old woman was attacked by a lion, leaving her with severe injuries to her arm. The woman, who was often described as a much-loved member of the zoo's extended family, had been observing keepers as they carried out their morning tasks in the carnivore precinct before the zoo opened to the public. According to zoo staff, she had watched keepers at work many times over the last 20 years and was familiar with the strict safety protocols around dangerous animals. Despite her experience, tragedy struck without warning. Zoo officials said that, inexplicably, at this stage, one animal grabbed her by one arm and caused severe damage to it. They confirmed that the lion did not leave its enclosure at any point, and that no members of the public or other staff were in danger. The attack happened in Pilton, a rural town west of Brisbane. Due to the seriousness of the injuries, emergency services quickly called in a rescue helicopter to transport the woman to Brisbane, the state capital. There, she underwent surgery. While the zoo's official statement said her condition was stable, several news outlets reported that the woman's arm could not be saved. The incident shocked both staff and the local community. For over 2 decades, the woman had been a regular presence at the zoo, showing dedication and passion for the animals. Though she was not an employee, her long association with the staff made her feel like part of the team. She was well versed in safety protocols around potentially dangerous animals, the zoo noted in its statement, underlining that this attack was highly unusual and unexpected. The Queensland state government confirmed that an official investigation has been launched. Workplace health and safety inspectors are now working with zoo staff to determine exactly how the attack occurred. These investigations typically look at whether safety procedures were followed, what conditions led to the incident, and how future risks can be reduced. Lions are among the most powerful predators in the animal kingdom, and even in captivity, their strength and instincts make them potentially dangerous. Attacks on humans in zoos are rare, but they do happen, usually when barriers are crossed or safety protocols break down. In this case, the zoo insists that its systems worked as intended, and the lion never left its enclosure. The statement was insistent that there was no threat to the public. Since the zoo had not yet opened for the day, no visitors were present, which prevented the situation from escalating further. Still, the incident has raised questions about the fine line between humans and wild animals in captivity. Zoos are designed to allow people to admire and learn about wildlife up close, but the events at Darling Downs are a reminder that these animals remain unpredictable and dangerous, no matter how long they have lived in human care. For now, the focus remains on the woman's recovery. Though she has suffered life-changing injuries, she survived an encounter that could easily have been fatal. Staff at the zoo expressed their sadness and concern for her in their statement, calling her an important and respected member of their community. The investigation is expected to take time, as authorities carefully review what happened in the moments leading up to the attack. Until then, the zoo continues to operate, while staff and the wider public are left reflecting on the risks that come with working so closely with wild animals. This attack is not the first incident involving dangerous animals at Australian zoos, but such cases are rare. The outcome of the investigation may lead to tighter safety measures or new restrictions for non-staff members near animal enclosures. For the woman at the center of this tragedy, however, the concern is no longer about safety procedures or investigations. It is about healing and learning to cope with a devastating injury that has permanently altered her life. Next up is a tragedy that shocked Canada and left wildlife experts scrambling for answers. It was October 27, 2009, on Nova Scotia's Skyline Trail, a rugged 4.3-mile path winding through Cape Breton Highlands National Park. Hikers loved it for its sweeping views of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, especially in autumn when the cliffs glow with reds and golds. But that crisp afternoon, the trail became the setting for something almost without precedent. The victim was Taylor Mitchell, a 19-year-old folk singer from Toronto. Just months earlier, she'd released her debut album, For Your Consideration, earning glowing reviews for her poetic lyrics and warm, earthy voice. That summer, she'd wowed audiences at the Winnipeg Folk Festival, quickly becoming one of Canada's most promising young artists. Between shows on a short Nova Scotia tour, Taylor decided to spend her day off hiking the Skyline Trail, a chance to enjoy the natural world she wrote about so often in her songs. Around 3 p.m., fellow hikers saw her heading back toward the parking lot. Not long after, an American couple on the same path noticed 2 eastern coyotes. Their behavior was off. Instead of fleeing, the animals stood their ground, staring boldly at the pair before melting back into the brush. Moments later, desperate cries echoed from deeper in the woods. Taylor had been attacked. At least 2 coyotes had gone after her as she walked alone. Scattered across the trail were her keys, a small pocket knife, and torn clothing, chilling signs of a frantic struggle. Farther down, hikers found her gravely injured, bleeding heavily, with one of the coyotes still hovering nearby. They managed to drive the animal off long enough to call for help. Paramedics rushed Taylor to a hospital in Cheticamp. Then she was airlifted to Halifax's Queen Elizabeth II Health Sciences Center. Doctors worked tirelessly, but her wounds were catastrophic. That evening, she died from massive blood loss. She was just 19. Investigators later confirmed the unthinkable. This was the first recorded case of an adult killed by coyotes in Canada, and only the second fatal attack on an adult in all of North America. Typically, coyotes are shy and avoid people, so why had this happened? Some experts speculated the animals might have been fed by visitors losing their fear of humans. Others pointed out that eastern coyotes in Cape Breton had begun hunting larger prey, like moose, and were developing bolder, more aggressive behavior. Authorities eventually captured 5 coyotes from the area. DNA testing showed at least 3 carried Taylor's blood, confirming their role in the attack. The Skyline Trail was temporarily closed while officials reassessed how to keep visitors safe in wild spaces. Taylor's death sent shockwaves through the music community and the wider public. She had just been nominated for a Canadian Folk Music Award as Young Performer of the Year. Her funeral in Owen Sound, Ontario was filled with friends, family, and fans remembering a gifted artist whose songs championed kindness and respect for nature. Today, her memory lives on through the Taylor Mitchell Legacy Trust, which funds arts programs and wildlife education. But the haunting events of that day remain a sobering reminder. Even in the most beautiful places, wild animals demand our caution and our respect. It was a warm Florida evening, June the 14th, 2016, at Disney World's Grand Floridian Resort. For the Graves family from Elkhorn, Nebraska, this was supposed to be one of those nights. 2-year-old Lane Thomas Graves was playing along the sandy edge of the Seven Seas Lagoon. His sister Ella was close by. His parents, Matt and Melissa, only steps away. Just behind them, Disney's outdoor screening of Zootopia played across a big screen as kids giggled and parents relaxed. It felt picture perfect, the very essence of Disney, happiness and safety wrapped together. And then, in an instant, that illusion shattered. At around 8:30 p.m., when families were beginning to wind down for the night, something stirred beneath the lagoon's dark surface. To most, it was invisible, silent, steady, patient. But to the sharp eyes of nature, this was prime hunting hour. Lane bent near the water's edge, innocent and curious, and that's when it happened. A shadow rose, a sudden rush. An alligator nearly 8 feet long lunged from the water and clamped its jaws around the little boy. The splash ripped through the night air. Lane's father, Matt, didn't hesitate. He hurled himself into the water, his hands clawing, pulling, fighting with every ounce of desperation a parent could summon. He screamed. He kicked. He tried to wrench his son free from the predator's grip, but the animal was relentless. In mere seconds, the water swallowed them both, and then Lane was gone. Chaos erupted. Families screamed, staff rushed, and the lagoon that had seemed so peaceful only moments earlier was now a scene of horror. Search teams mobilized, divers, wildlife officers, Disney staff, all working through the long night, combing every inch of the water. Parents across the country stayed glued to their screens, whispering prayers for a boy they'd never met. But by morning, hope was fading, and then, 17 hours later, the truth surfaced. Lane's body was found just 6 feet underwater, only yards from where he had been taken. The autopsy confirmed what no parent should ever hear: Lane had drowned. His small body bore the marks of the attack, but it wasn't just nature's violence that haunted people. It was how ordinary the setting had been. A child playing by the water, parents just feet away, a resort known for fantasy and magic. The shock turned quickly to questions. Why weren't there warning signs about alligators? Why did the posted signs only mention no swimming? Guests had reported seeing gators before, but no strong measures were taken. It was Disney after all, a place where danger felt unthinkable. In the days that followed, the company moved quickly. Nearly 100 alligators were removed from Disney properties. Barriers were built around the lagoon. Signs were replaced, this time with warnings that left no room for doubt. But for the Graves family, those changes came too late. Camping in northern Australia often feels like stepping into another world. The nights are quiet, the skies are filled with stars, and the only sounds are the soft ripples of water and the rustle of trees in the breeze. For 19-year-old Peter Rousel, that stillness seemed safe as he set up camp one Sunday night by the edge of the water. But in Australia's wilderness, peace can vanish in an instant. What began as a calm night turned into a fight for his life when one of the country's most feared predators came out of the dark. At around 4:30 in the morning, Peter was suddenly jolted awake by a pain so sharp it barely felt real. Something was clamped tightly onto his right foot, shaking with brutal force. In the blur between sleep and panic, he looked down and saw what most people hope never to face up close. A saltwater crocodile, at least 3 to 4 meters long, had latched onto him. It was a nightmare made real, the kind of danger that locals warn about but many visitors don't fully believe until it happens. Crocodiles are built for ambush. They strike with shocking speed, their jaws snapping shut with bone-crushing power, before dragging their prey into the water for the infamous death roll. Few survive once they are caught, but Peter didn't freeze. Instinct took over, and he did the only thing that might have saved him. With his foot still locked in the reptile's jaws, he struck the crocodile hard on the head, once, then again. To his astonishment, it worked. The animal released him and slipped silently back into the water, leaving only ripples and a shaken teenager scrambling away from the edge. The attack had lasted only seconds, but the damage was severe. His lower right leg was torn by deep puncture wounds, the marks of the crocodile's teeth pressing into his flesh. Blood stained the sand, and every step was agony. Yet he was alive, something many victims of such attacks cannot say. Help was called quickly, and he was taken to a hospital where doctors treated his injuries. The wounds were painful and permanent, but they were not life-threatening. For Peter, survival itself was a miracle. The sheer size and power of the saltwater crocodile make it one of the deadliest animals on the planet. They can grow to over 7 meters in length and weigh more than a ton. Perfectly adapted to lie in wait, they are silent hunters, slipping unnoticed beneath the surface until the right moment comes. Northern Australians know their reputation well, and signs warning people to keep away from the water's edge are everywhere. But even with precautions, crocodiles have a way of reminding people that they are always there, watching, waiting. Peter's decision to camp near the edge of the water gave the predator the chance it needed, and he was lucky to escape with his life. The outcome could have been far worse. Many victims of crocodile attacks never make it back to shore. Once dragged into the water, the chances of survival shrink dramatically. Experts often say the only hope is to fight back, aiming for the animal's eyes or snout, both of which are sensitive. Peter didn't know if his desperate punches would work, but they did, just in time. His story now stands as proof that quick thinking and a bit of instinct can make the difference between life and death when the wild shows its teeth. As Peter recovers from his wounds, his terrifying encounter remains a powerful reminder of the dangers hidden within Australia's beauty. The stars may shine brightly, the rivers may look calm, and the bush may whisper with a peaceful breeze, but in the shadows lurk creatures older and stronger than we can imagine. For a 19-year-old camper on a quiet night, that truth became terrifyingly real, and while his scars will fade with time, the memory of jaws clamping down in the dark will never leave him. Our next story takes us deep into the wilds of Alaska, a place where beauty and danger exist side by side. It was October 2003 in Katmai National Park, a sprawling, untamed expanse along Alaska's rugged coast. For more than a decade, Timothy Treadwell had made this wilderness his summer home, sharing the landscape with some of the largest grizzly bears in North America. To his supporters, Timothy was a passionate protector of wildlife, a man determined to build a bridge between humans and animals most people feared. To his critics, he was a thrill-seeker pushing the limits of common sense, daring fate one season too many. Treadwell wasn't always the rugged bear man. Born in 1957, he once dreamed of Hollywood fame, hoping to carve out a career as an actor. But after years of frustration and setbacks, he reinvented himself completely, adopting a new persona as a self-styled guardian of grizzlies. His boundless enthusiasm and almost childlike wonder made him a compelling figure. Schools invited him to speak, television crews followed him into the wild, and he even appeared on late-night talk shows. Alongside a friend, he co-founded Grizzly People, a nonprofit aimed at educating the public about bear conservation. With a video camera always in hand, he recorded nearly every moment of his life among the bears, creating an extraordinary archive of their world and his own. By the summer of 2003, Timothy wasn't alone. He was joined by his girlfriend, Amy Huguenard, a 37-year-old physician's assistant from Colorado. Amy admired Timothy's dedication, but never fully shared his comfort around the massive predators. She often felt uneasy in Katmai's remote corners, yet her affection and loyalty kept her by his side, even when the wilderness felt threatening. That fall, the pair set up camp at Kaflia Bay, a harsh and isolated area far from rangers or other visitors. It was late in the season, a dangerous period when bears become increasingly aggressive, competing for scarce food before hibernation. Typically, Timothy ended his expeditions by late September, but that year he chose to extend their stay, hoping to capture more footage of the animals he adored. On the evening of October 5th, disaster struck. A massive male grizzly, later identified as Bear 141, emerged from the shadows and lumbered into their campsite without warning. What followed was pure horror. Their video camera, left rolling with the lens cap still on, caught only the sounds. Timothy's panicked shouts, the bear's deep guttural roars, and Amy's terrified screams as she tried in vain to drive the animal away. The attack lasted only a few minutes, yet its outcome was devastating. When rangers finally reached the remote site, they discovered a grim tableau, the remains of both Timothy and Amy lying near their collapsed tent. A severed arm, still wearing Timothy's ticking wristwatch, was found nearby. Inside the stomach of Bear 141 were human remains and scraps of clothing, leaving no doubt about the violence that had unfolded. For safety, a younger bear seen lingering near the camp was also euthanized. News of the tragedy spread quickly, shocking the world. Katmai had gone 85 years without a single fatal bear attack. To some, Timothy's death felt inevitable, the tragic conclusion of a man who believed he could live as one with apex predators. To others, it was the ultimate price for an unwavering devotion to nature's raw beauty. 2 years later, director Werner Herzog released Grizzly Man, weaving Timothy's own footage into a haunting documentary that reignited debate. Was Treadwell a hero who sacrificed everything for the creatures he loved, or a reckless dreamer who put himself and Amy in mortal peril? Whatever your view, Timothy Treadwell's story stands as a stark reminder of the razor-thin line between awe and danger when humans walk unguarded into the wild. The Red Sea is known for its beauty, a paradise for divers, snorkelers, and vacationers who dream of crystal-clear waters. But in December 2010, that paradise turned into a nightmare. What began as an ordinary holiday in the Egyptian resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh became the setting for one of the most shocking and unprecedented shark attack clusters ever recorded. It started on December 1st. The waters near Ras Nasrani were calm, dotted with swimmers enjoying the sun. And then, within minutes, chaos erupted. 4 people, 3 Russians and 1 Ukrainian, were mauled almost back to back. The violence was unimaginable. A woman screamed as a shark tore into her, ripping away her hand and part of her leg. Another tourist fought for her life, blood clouding the water as onlookers scrambled to pull her out. Witnesses recalled using nothing more than swimsuits to bind her wounds, rubber fins to beat the shark back. Tourists, terrified, helpless, watched the sea turn red. The stories from that day were chilling. One husband recounted the moment he heard his wife gasp, "Shark! Shark!" as she struggled against the predator. She lost an arm, then a foot, but somehow fought her way back toward the beach. Another victim managed to reach the pier, only to have the shark strike again, tearing flesh as horrified vacationers tried to drag her to safety. By nightfall, the once bustling shoreline was deserted. Panic spread. Tourists abandoned their sunbeds, retreating indoors. Lifeguards, divers, and officials closed beaches as fear gripped the resort town. Still, the danger wasn't over. Authorities captured 2 massive sharks in the following days, an oceanic whitetip and a mako, hoping they had the culprits. Local officials rushed to assure the public it was safe. Beaches reopened. Life seemed to return to normal. But just 1 day later, on December 5th, the nightmare struck again. Renate Seifert, a 71-year-old German woman who had vacationed in Sharm el-Sheikh for over a decade, waded into the shallow waters of Nama Bay near the Hyatt Hotel. She had done it many times before, but this time she never came back. A mako shark attacked her in full view of horrified beachgoers. There was a scream, a violent thrashing, and then silence. Witnesses described blood spreading in the water as rescuers pulled her back to shore, but it was too late. Her arm had been severed. She died within minutes. The fear was suffocating. Tourists who had come for sun and luxury now huddled indoors, refusing to go near the sea. Businesses suffered. Bars emptied. Diving excursions vanished overnight. For a resort town that thrived on its reputation for beauty and safety, the attacks left scars deeper than the water itself. But the biggest question was why? Why had sharks, normally elusive, rarely aggressive in these waters, suddenly turned on humans in such a brutal sequence? Experts proposed theories that only made the story darker. Overfishing in the Red Sea had starved the predators, pushing them closer to shore. Unscrupulous divers may have illegally fed sharks, training them to associate humans with food. And perhaps most disturbing of all, during the Islamic festival of Eid al-Adha just weeks earlier, livestock ships had dumped carcasses of sheep into the Red Sea, fresh bait that may have lured hungry sharks unnaturally close to popular beaches. In the end, investigators concluded that both oceanic whitetip and mako sharks were responsible, their attacks triggered by a perfect storm of unnatural conditions: overfishing, illegal feeding, carcass dumping, and rising water temperatures. But for the victims, for the witnesses, and for the resort town whose name became synonymous with fear, the answers brought little comfort. The Red Sea, so often painted as a postcard paradise, had revealed another side of itself. For days, it became a place of terror, and perhaps the most disturbing part of it all is how quickly beauty can turn into horror, how shallow waters, where families laugh and play, can, in an instant, become the stage for unspeakable violence. Shark attacks have always loomed over the waters of South Australia, but for many surfers and coastal communities, the ocean is still home, still sacred, still irresistible. Last year passed without a single fatality, offering a rare sense of relief. Yet the hope that the danger had lessened was short-lived. As 2024 ended and 2025 began, tragedy returned with devastating force, taking lives and shaking the coastline's sense of safety all over again. The first heartbreak came on December 28, 2023, when 15-year-old surfer Kai Cowley was killed near Ethel Beach, off York Peninsula. A teenager full of promise, his life was cut short in a moment of chaos and horror. That grief was still raw when, barely days into the new year, another life was lost. This time, it was 28-year-old surfer Lance Appleby, attacked southwest of Streaky Bay while doing what he loved most, riding the waves on a summer evening. Witnesses on the beach watched helplessly as the incident unfolded before their eyes. It was brutal, sudden, and irreversible, leaving the community stunned in silence. The police confirmed the loss, but no official words could soften the blow. For locals who knew Lance, the pain ran deep. He wasn't just another name in the headlines. He was part of the town's history, remembered as a talented footballer, a premiership winner, a man with an easy smile and a knack for making people laugh. To the Marble Range Football Club, where he once played, he was more than a teammate. He was family. Their tribute called him a heart of gold, someone adored by everyone who knew him. His death wasn't just a tragedy in the water, it was a wound across the entire community. In towns like Streaky Bay, these losses are felt collectively. People grow up together, surf together, play sports together. When one is taken, everyone mourns. Local resident Jeff Schmucker, who had known Lance since he was a baby, said the news left people numb. Fear was settling in too, the kind that changes habits and reshapes traditions. Surfing, once a source of freedom and joy, was starting to feel dangerous, even reckless. The West Coast, long celebrated for its wild waves, was beginning to carry a shadow. Others who had been in the area echoed the unease. Isaac, a spearfisher who happened to be about 600 meters away during the attack, admitted he and his companions had already felt nervous about the spot. The breaks were popular, yes, but the waters had a reputation, a sharky area, as locals often call it. On that day, he said, the tension was clear. There were plenty of surfers enjoying the swells, but something about the scene felt risky, as if everyone knew what could happen yet chose to paddle out anyway. He and his group stayed away, uneasy about what might be lurking beneath the surface. Hours later, their instincts proved chillingly accurate. This latest tragedy wasn't an isolated incident. In October 2023, just months before Lance's death, 55-year-old surfer Todd Gendel was taken by a shark at Granite's Beach, the very same stretch of coast. Witnesses said he had been knocked from his board before vanishing into the sea. Earlier that same year in May, a much-loved teacher named Simon Baccanello lost his life to a shark near Elliston, roughly 120 kilometers from Streaky Bay. In less than 2 years, South Australia had endured 4 fatal shark attacks. For a region so deeply tied to the ocean, that number was staggering. The questions, of course, have grown louder. Why does it feel like these attacks are happening more often? Some locals, like Schmucker, believe the great white shark population has surged since gillnet fishing was banned along the west coast around 15 years ago. Others point to the 25th anniversary of great white protections, with conservation measures introduced after the species was declared vulnerable to extinction. While protections have undoubtedly helped preserve these apex predators, they have also left coastal communities wrestling with fear, wondering whether safety has been sacrificed in the process. Scientists and surfers alike have called for closer study of whether the protections are linked to the apparent increase in encounters. For now, the grief is what lingers. Each name, Kai, Todd, Simon, Lance, carries a story, a family, a community left grappling with the reality of the ocean's danger. Our next story takes us to the heart of Africa, where a peaceful safari turned into a scene of unimaginable tragedy. It was August 2001 in Kenya's Tsavo East National Park, a vast, sun-baked wilderness known for its elephants, lions, and sweeping savanna. Among the tourists exploring its beauty was Jacques Jackie Boxberger, one of France's most celebrated middle-distance runners. Born in 1949, Boxberger had risen to stardom as a teenager. At just 19, he shattered the world junior record in the 1,500 meters and competed in the 1968 Olympic Games in Mexico City, placing 6th in the final. Over the next 2 decades, he became a fixture in international athletics, running in 4 Olympics between 1968 and 1984. He twice won the Paris Marathon, took the Marrakesh Marathon in 1987, and collected multiple French national titles. Even a serious knee injury during military service couldn't dim his determination. By the time he retired, Boxberger was a legend, admired not just for his endurance, but for his passion for the sport. Away from the track, he was known as a devoted family man and an avid photographer. That summer, he traveled with his wife and daughter to Kenya, eager to capture the country's landscapes and wildlife through his camera lens. On an August afternoon near the Voi region of Tsavo East, the family stopped for a picnic. Always drawn to the perfect shot, Boxberger walked about 200 yards from the car to film a nearby elephant. The massive creature appeared calm as it grazed in the distance, and for a moment it must have seemed like the perfect opportunity. But elephants, despite their reputation for gentleness, can turn dangerously protective without warning, especially if they feel threatened or surprised. As Boxberger focused through his viewfinder, the elephant suddenly shifted its posture, then charged. Witnesses say it happened in seconds. The animal closed the distance, wrapped its trunk around Boxberger, and hurled him violently against a tree. The sound of the impact shattered the quiet plains. Before anyone could react, the elephant struck again, trampling him under its enormous weight. His wife and daughter watched in shock, powerless to intervene. Rangers and guides rushed to the scene, but it was too late. Boxberger died from his injuries at the age of 52. News of his death spread quickly to France, leaving the sports world stunned. Headlines called it a bitter irony. A man who had conquered Olympic tracks and grueling marathons, lost not to time or illness, but to the untamed strength of Africa's wildlife. In the years after, his daughter, Claire Boxberger, followed in his footsteps, becoming a middle-distance runner herself and honoring her father's athletic spirit. For fans and fellow athletes, his passing was more than a freak accident. It was a sobering reminder that even the most disciplined and accomplished among us are vulnerable when stepping into nature's domain. Jacques Boxberger's life, filled with records, victories, and personal devotion, ended far from the roar of stadium crowds. In its place was the thunder of an elephant's charge across the African savanna, a tragic testament to the raw power of the wild. It was a warm night on the island of Koh Samui, Thailand in 2015. Tourists were scattered along Lomé Beach, enjoying the calm waters under the glow of the moon. Among them was a 20-year-old German woman, laughing with a friend as they waded into the sea. The water was shallow, quiet, almost inviting. No one suspected that beneath the surface, something invisible and deadly was waiting. Moments later, she screamed. A sting so searing, so unbearable, tore through her body that her friend could only watch in horror. In the darkness, trailing tentacles, nearly 3 meters long, had brushed against her skin. A box jellyfish, one of the most venomous creatures in the world. Its toxins can stop a heart in minutes, shut down the nervous system, and leave even the strongest swimmer helpless. She thrashed in the water, gasping for air, the agony unlike anything a human body should endure. Her friend, stung on the hand, but still able to move, tried desperately to pull her to shore. By the time they reached land, her body was already failing. The excruciating pain gave way to collapse, and despite doctors fighting to save her at a nearby hospital, she was pronounced dead. She wasn't the first. Just months earlier, a young Thai woman had suffered the same fate on a neighboring island. The year before, a 5-year-old French boy was killed in almost the same waters. 3 lives gone in little more than a year, all claimed by a creature so elusive it can slip past unnoticed in waist-deep water. Authorities rushed to respond, torn between saving lives and protecting tourism. Some business owners feared that warning signs would scare visitors away, but experts were blunt. Box jellyfish were appearing more often, drawn in by changing seas, pollution, and the loss of turtles that once kept their numbers down. They weren't floating on the surface like other jellyfish. They were swimming just beneath it, nearly invisible, especially at night. For most of us, the ocean feels like freedom. We splash in the shallows. We swim under the stars. We believe the worst that can happen is a cramp or a current pulling us away. But that night on Koh Samui shattered the illusion. A young woman on vacation, a moment of joy, ended in silence. One brush of translucent tentacles, one sting, and the water that seemed so safe became her grave. The sun was dipping low over Kagari, better known as Fraser Island, its waters glowing gold as families cooled off in the shallows of a lagoon. For one young girl, a carefree afternoon swim quickly turned into a nightmare that will haunt her and her family forever. Without warning, a wild dingo slipped out of the landscape and into the water, turning what should have been an idyllic holiday moment into a desperate fight for survival. The girl, a primary school student, had been splashing happily when the predator struck from behind. In an instant, it lunged at her head, its jaws clamping down as it tried to drag her beneath the surface. Witnesses described how the animal held her under the water for several agonizing seconds, long enough for panic to rise, long enough to feel the terrifying reality of a wild animal's strength. Her family rushed to her aid, tearing her from its grasp before the dingo could do more damage. When rescuers arrived, the child was shaken and bloodied, with bite wounds to her head and fingers. Paramedics treated her at the scene, doing what they could to ease her pain before she was lifted by helicopter into the sky and flown to hospital. Though her injuries were serious, she was stable, alive, and in the hands of doctors who would do everything to mend the wounds left by the attack. The Life Flight crew said their call came at 4:40 p.m. that Monday afternoon. Another reminder that danger on Kagari can arrive suddenly, even in the most ordinary of moments. Rangers from the Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service later confirmed the girl had been attacked while swimming in shallow water, where many visitors feel safe. The dingo is believed to have been an untagged male, one of about 200 that roam the island. Investigators are now working to track the animal involved, weighing how best to protect both people and the fragile wild population that has become so closely tied to the island's identity. Officials extended their sympathies to the girl and her family, acknowledging the trauma they endured in what should have been a simple, carefree day out. Their words of comfort, however sincere, cannot erase the shock of watching a child nearly dragged under by a wild predator just meters from the shoreline. For the family, the images of that moment will linger long after the wounds heal. Kagari is a place of breathtaking beauty, a UNESCO World Heritage Site where sand dunes, rainforests, and freshwater lakes attract thousands of visitors each year. But its beauty is matched by a raw wildness that cannot be ignored. The island is home to one of the purest populations of dingoes in Australia, animals that have lived alongside humans for thousands of years, yet remain unpredictable. Authorities remind visitors constantly that these dingoes are wild, not pets, and that feeding them is illegal. carrying heavy fines. The warnings exist for a reason. A fed dingo quickly becomes habituated to humans, losing its natural caution and increasing the risk of attacks like this one. This incident was not the first. Only last year, a 5-year-old boy was also airlifted to hospital after being bitten on the head, arm, and buttocks during another beachside attack. These recurring encounters raise questions about how people and predators can safely share the island, and whether more measures are needed to protect both. For many Australians, dingoes are iconic, a symbol of the wild spirit of the land. But for families like this one, that symbolism will forever be shadowed by fear. The attack on the young girl is a stark reminder of the risks hidden in paradise. On K'gari, the lagoons may look inviting, the beaches may stretch endlessly, and the bush may whisper of ancient beauty, but the wild heart of the island is always present, always watching. Visitors step into the dingo's territory, and in that space, the balance between human enjoyment and animal survival can break without warning. As the girl recovers in hospital, her story joins a growing list of encounters that echo far beyond Queensland's coast. They are stories that remind us that the wild, while magnificent, is never truly safe. The island's dingoes will remain fierce and untamed, a part of K'gari's identity. And those who come to swim, camp, and wander must remember that here, more than anywhere, nature sets the rules.